Welcome to Under the Lens. Come and enjoy an extraordinary, raw, and unfiltered podcast that delivers debate, discussions, and interviews about film, pop culture, and everything in between. Here is your host, film critic and journalist, Byron Lafayette.
Hey all, and welcome to Under the Lens. So happy that you're able to join us today. I have a very special guest with me today, Black Nerd Magic. He is a film critic in the Seattle region, and he has appeared and he writes for the Feelin Film podcast. He has agreed to come on today and discuss a very controversial film in the pantheon of Hollywood, which is the Matrix 3 or Matrix Revolutions. This film released a number of years ago and is, let's just say, not exactly remembered fondly. It has its fans, though, and which is one reason I wanted him to come on today so that we could kind of just go over the film a little bit and talk about what we liked, what we didn't like. So thanks for joining me today.
No problem, man. I'm happy to be on, especially talking about The Matrix, because while we can say it's a polarizing series, it's always an interesting conversation to have.
This is 100% true, because, The Matrix is and was, a very, very influential film series, especially the first one. I mean, it really kind of opened our eyes to what action movies could be in terms of script and just how they were made.
Yeah, and also, not only was it landmark, as far as for the action genre, but also it carried these deep philosophical themes that have been studied and that have been, talked about for over 20 years at this point. I remember the first time watching The Matrix, you're kind of googly eyed for the action, the bullet time, and all of the, just the different feel, the different unique feel of it. But once you go back and rewatch it over and over again, you start to get these deep themes and these messages and these things that go in parallel with real life and the issues we face in our society today. And you start to get a greater understanding of how this series has become as popular as it has been.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, because it was interesting because I hadn't seen the trilogy for a long time. Like I want to say, I believe I had seen it maybe about 10 years ago or so. And I remember really enjoying it and just kind of like, I was like, whoa, this is like so different and so cool. And then, when Resurrections was announced, I was like, okay, I got to go back and rewatch these again. And, watched them over the course of about the last 3 weeks or so. And just seeing the first one over again, it was so incredible, because especially back then, we didn't have action movies with these deep philosophical themes and theological themes and, asking these weighty questions, and it was incredible, especially the first one. And even I believe that was continued on into Reloaded, which, isn't as well regarded as the first one, but it still delivers in a lot of areas. But one thing that I think is very interesting, is that we're here to talk about revolutions a little bit here, and this was a film trilogy, back in the day that had a beginning, middle, and ending. It wasn't like the whole cinematic universes that we're seeing nowadays, where things are being kind of drug out, left open, not really closing things off.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, as I was rewatching these, it was just so interesting to see, this kind of bookended trilogy versus a universe. I don't know. I just thought it was just interesting kind of looking back on a different period of time.
Yeah, and also people forget that The Matrix Reloaded was released 6 months before Revolution. So it's kind of like you almost had like, I hate to bring this up, but I'm going to use this as a comparison. Like you remember Twilight, where they had Breaking Dawn Part 1, then they had Part 2, and then they had Avengers Infinity War, and then they had Endgame. But The Matrix Reloaded and Revolutions were only 6 months apart. So, I mean, I can't imagine during this era. I mean, I was around for this era, but I was just a little kid during this time. But I couldn't imagine the hype and the anticipation and the excitement that it was following, not only just The Matrix as a whole, but these two films, because they were released in such a short period of time. And while it can be said that Reload and Revolutions are not that strong, and I typically do agree, I felt that Reload and Revolutions were kind of going for more of that blockbuster feel, but the first one was able to combine that blockbuster feel, but also be always about the story, always about the world building, and, able to flesh out, the characters and understanding Neo's place within this whole thing and his fate and everything. And I think Reload and Revolutions kind of went towards, oh, hey, we got all of these cool new gadgets. We got all these explosions. We got all these slow motion fights for you. The battle of 100 Agent Smiths against one Neo. We have all that for you. And, for most people, they still consider that great. But these two sequels were kind of like, they're cool, but they don't really reach the level of the first film.
No, I would agree with that, because, it's kind of like, when I was rewatching, it's like, I love Reloaded because I was like, like you said, oh, it's 100 Smiths, and just all this stuff. And it does in a sense what every sequel should do, of, upping the stakes, upping the action, upping the effects and everything. But there is a little bit lost. Because, obviously the first one was such a hit that it was kind of like, hey, they got all this extra budget, to be able to spend. And
Mm-hmm.
and especially, with the Wachowskis, they are always pushing the limit, of what they could do. And especially when I was watching Reloaded, that I felt like I was like, oh wow, it's incredible what they were pushing to do with special effects back then, because obviously nowadays, it's like we see like Age of Ultron, whatever, like having 100 enemies, versus your hero is not really that big a deal nowadays. But back then, having that all special effects was huge, and it was kind of funny, but there was one person I read online, and this is kind of officially now my headcanon, that they were like, oh, the special effects are a little wonky during the Smith Neo fight in Reloaded. And they said, but I like to think about it as those fights were not meant to exist in the Matrix, and so the Matrix was glitching out, and it was low rendered. And I was like,
That's a good theory.
I was like, okay, that's my new headcanon now. So, but going back a little bit to what you said, because I'm so glad you brought up the release date, between Reloaded and Revolutions, because I think it's so interesting to see, two films that were released in such a short period of time. Because nowadays we see, anywhere from, 3 to 5 years sometimes between sequels, down to like what Infinity War and Endgame, where it was a year. But we almost never see films, released within the same year for the sequels. And I think that was very, very interesting. And I can kind of see, though, a little bit of why they were doing it. Because when I finished Reloaded and then went to watch Revolutions, it really was kind of almost that Force Awakens, Last Jedi, almost, of like starting right where the other one ended, like no downtime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, Revolution just picks up right after Reload ends, and that's something you don't often see with sequels. Most times, sequels will kind of jump to a earlier. They'll either jump to an earlier time period or they'll jump to a future time period. Still continue on with the story, but not immediate like Reloaded and Revolution's handoff was.
No, yeah, definitely. And, I can definitely imagine that there was probably, back then, a lot of hype, with especially how Reloaded ended, because it was very much that cliffhanger ending. Even though I'd already seen him before, when I finished Reload, I was like, oh man, I want to go and watch, Revolutions immediately now. But so, overall, what are your overall feelings for Revolutions before we kind of jump into what we liked and disliked? What's your overall feel for it?
Overall, my feelings have changed for Revolutions. I remember when it first came out, and could also be me being a kid and, not watching enough movies as it was at the time, but I didn't really like Revolutions. I thought that it was, say, boring, and that it kind of ended in a way that you saw coming. It was very anticlimactic. But going back and, rewatching it over the last month, I kind of understand what Revolution serves as. It serves as a epilogue. It serves as a really ending to the whole Matrix story, and I can appreciate that. We finally see Neo conquer, and achieve what he was set out to achieve. If you want to call it fate, call it what you will, but Neo finally became who he was destined to be, who Morpheus believed him to be, the one. And you saw these unsung heroes in Zion, these supporting characters. It's not just Neo that comes and saves the day. There's a lot of supporting characters that are sacrificing and that have these big moments in this last film and really come together to help keep Zion to stay afloat and to keep the human race from being extinct. And then you have these questions of belief, love, destiny, the Messiah. You have all of these the strong symbolism, strong religious symbolism, strong, earth symbolism, artificial intelligence. All these things really come together to make Revolutions a very interesting end to a trilogy. And will I say that it reaches the level of the first Matrix? No, not close. Is it as fun as Reloaded? No, I wouldn't say that. But I would say this. What more could you ask for from a final film in a trilogy? And Revolutions does the right thing by pretty much closing the door on it all and kind of tying up everything in a nice little bow. Is it perfect? No. Is it loud and obnoxious sometimes? It is. But I have a lot more respect for Revolutions now than when it first came out.
Very well said. I have very similar thoughts. I was much the same way. That when I went into this, I remembered, kind of having, a waning like, in the sense of, first one was my favorite, then I really enjoyed Reloaded, and then I was kind of like, I didn't really like, Revolutions. But I kind of felt when I rewatched it this time, I really came to a greater appreciation for it. Because it was exactly as you said. I appreciated the ending of kind of how they closed everything up, but also what I kind of appreciated too was in some ways that it kind of was a ballsy ending almost, in some ways, because a lot of times, especially when I first saw it, you kind of expected this more traditional, oh, they're going to defeat the machines, oh, they're going to free all of the humans, oh, we're going to have, this, really happy ending, so to speak. And we get that happy ending. But at the same time, also, it's this almost subverted expectation of like how the victory is achieved, and exactly, what Neo does achieve in the end with the machines. And so, upon my revisiting of it, I found I enjoyed that subversion of expectation a little bit more with how it ended. And, I really enjoyed the religious aspects of it. I really enjoyed the philosophical, but I liked that it gave a little bit of focus to the human side. And it's kind of interesting because when we get to what we liked and disliked, I have a bit of a love-hate when it comes to the human side. But I really enjoyed kind of seeing these extra characters. There's, just one that comes to mind is I can't exactly remember his name, but he's the one who's in charge of the battle mechs. I'll have to look up the character's name. But we got to see basically this kind of like, a bit of a lower level commander, and like how he deals with his volunteers. And it was just interesting, and just seeing, the human emotion of how they were dealing with extinction, basically. And so I really did enjoy that, and I felt that we got a little bit more of the human aspect versus just kind of the supernatural godlike aspect. Even though we did get a good finale to that, I felt.
Yeah, the character you're looking for is Captain Mifune. That's what that's what his name was. Yeah, it's pretty interesting because it feels like this film it really gets seriously into what it wants to be. If you're judging from looking outside the Zion scenes, I'm not gonna lie, I think the scenes in Zion are kind of the weakest aspect of this film. Even though most of the battle of humans and machines takes place in Zion, I think the parts that you get where Neo is in the train station and he's in the middle between the Matrix and the machine world, and when you see Neo visit the Oracle, and he kind of understands that he has to make a choice, but he doesn't know what that choice is going to be. But when the time comes, he'll know what to do. And then you have Agent Smith, who feels like the battle is already won, and he comes in and goes to the Oracle and pretty much just taunts her and tells her that by the end, the world will be mine, the Zions will be destroyed. And then you have the drama that is in Zion, where you have these other characters, and even though it's mostly just a lot of special effects and a lot of explosions and big robot machines, there are some human aspects to the area in Zion that do deserve mention. But for me, the climatic battle between Agent Smith and Neo, I feel like that's pretty much what the whole franchise is leading up to. It's pretty much that final solo battle between these two guys who are like one and another. They urge each on. They urge each other on. I like to compare Neo and Agent Smith to the Batman and Joker relationship. Is that they despise each other, but in somewhat inside of both of them, they know that that's their nemesis. That is the person that really brings out everything in them. And Neo and Agent Smith are one and the same. You know, they are both powerful. Agent Smith being a robot, being a program, and Neo being this guy who is supposed to be the guy who's supposed to bring the end, you know, and be the salvation for humankind. I mean, it's very powerful how this movie ends, but if I had to say there was one weak aspect of this, it would have to be the scenes that take place in Zion.
Yes, that was really kind of the almost like love-hate, pull that I had with this film, because as you said, the final duel with Smith and Neo and the scenes that we get, with the train man and the train station, those Matrix scenes are honestly, and it's why we're watching this franchise. It's the franchise is called The Matrix. It's about this world, this programmable world that's been created and the humans who are hacking it. And so, I didn't particularly care for, how this film really did pull you out into the human drama, even though I did enjoy aspects of it. That I did feel that I thought it was interesting how little time we actually spend in the Matrix in Revolutions. I mean, I believe the film was like 2 hours and 10 minutes long, and I mean, I would say maybe we spend about maybe 35-40 minutes in the Matrix, maybe total. I would say, give or take. And so I was a little displeased with that aspect of it. I get what they were going for. But at the same time, we're here for the drama, like you said, between Smith and Neo, especially because, when we saw what he had become in Reloaded and we saw what his end game was, that's what we were all in for and wanted to see. And I think it was kind of interesting too that in the first film, we're kind of shown that, oh, this is a human versus machines conflict, and the main adversary is going to be, those machines in Machine City. But then it was kind of interesting that when you basically see in Reloaded, basically, that the real enemy is not actually those machines. It's Smith, and it's his evolving virus that is taking over. And I really liked how they continued that in Revolutions. And so I kept kind of feeling as I'm watching it, hey, I want to see how this concludes. I want to see how it's going with him. So I was a little unhappy that we kept kind of flashing back a little bit to the human versus machine conflict. And it was almost, it was interesting that in one of my columns of dislike, what I marked down was that this film was both too long and too short. That I kind of felt like, okay, we could shave off some of this, like some of the Zion scenes, and maybe have like a really strong, hour and 40-minute, action philosophy film. But then I also thought, well, you know what? I'd actually like to see some extra scenes in the Matrix, some extra stuff going on in there. So I was like, man, maybe add another 30 minutes to it. And so I was kind of going back and forth. I was like, oh, this is one of those odd situations where I'm not sure if it was too long or too short.
Yeah, I kind of get what you mean. I feel for me that most long films don't justify themselves to be long. A lot of films add in a lot of filler, a lot of extra scenes, a lot of this extra exposition that kind of doesn't make any sense. With The Matrix, I do feel that there is a better version of this film where you kind of just leave the Zion, the whole humans versus machines battle. You kind of leave that in the background, maybe show a couple of scenes of that every so often in an hour, but you leave most of the texture of this film to Neo and his journey, because this is the guy that is going to end it all. So it makes a lot of sense just to keep following this guy. And, if not him, then we follow Trinity. We follow Morpheus. Maybe we get more scenes of Morpheus trying to make others believe in his belief about Neo, because he still is facing doubt in this film about whether Neo is going to pan out as the one, as whether Morpheus is almost like a kooky old man who is believing in these delusions and disbeliefs. There is also, another version of this film where we get that Neo Agent Smith, but it's not just this battle. We get more of a extended sequence where we see them talking and having a conversation about their philosophies and what they mean to each other, and what the demise of one is going to mean for the other one. There could have been a lot more development. There could have been a lot more fixings within those certain aspects of the narrative. But I think, given, that it's hard for any film to follow up a film like The Matrix. It's very hard for that. No matter what Reload and Revolution is going to do, they were never really going to be the film that was going to topple the first Matrix. I mean, it's hard to do that. So I think with Revolutions, this is probably the best we were going to get, unless there's a director's cut out there of the Revolutions and it hasn't been exposed yet. But yeah, I think this is the best we were going to do. And it's a good product. It's not the greatest, but it's a good product.
Yeah, because overall, I was satisfied with how it ended. I thought it really did wrap the story that began in the first film, continued in the second. I thought it did a good job of that. And I was, even though I disagreed with some of the aspects, of where it went and some of the, and in a little bit I'll mention some of the other aspects I felt could have been done a little bit better. But that being said, I think that it does still deliver a few moments that, for me do stand up, with the first and second film in some of those areas. Like, for example, near the end of the final duel, that speech that Smith gives to Neo, where he goes on saying, "Why do you persist?" It's such a great moment. I mean, that moment, I was just like, this speech and this moment here, goes right back to the first film in a lot of ways. And I absolutely loved that moment because I felt it encapsulated so well of kind of the triumph of the human spirit with Neo, of just continuing on in the face of certain death and, and not exactly knowing how it was going to end. And it also encapsulated, I liked the whole aspect of Smith of that he didn't understand humanity. He claimed that he did, and he claimed that, oh, you're a virus, you're this and that. But at the end of the day, he did not understand why Neo was continuing to fight. And I love what you said earlier of that kind of that Batman Joker relationship, because I think that that's very, very accurate. That Neo and Smith are very much kind of this yin and yang, darkness and light, and that Smith is almost kind of this, I don't like to just say evil version of Neo, because he's more than that. But he's this, this cold logic and reasoning machine that was given a little bit of free will and given a little bit of choice, from his first defeat in the first film. And then it's very interesting kind of seeing what this machine of coldness and logic and, and destruction basically does with that free will.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. I feel that, by the end of Revolutions, what we get with the Oracle talking with the little girl Sadie and asking her, will we see Neo again? Because by this point, Neo is gone. He has given everything to save Zion. And the Oracle, she says, well, we'll see him, but maybe not in this world. And, I tried to have a 7-foot wingspan reach, thinking that maybe this was like a clever clue that Resurrections was going to be like introduced. But seeing how Resurrections has turned out, and I don't want to spoil your next episode of the podcast, but it didn't turn out too well. But I kind of like to think that was maybe a reminder or a instinctive little like quote of dialogue that lets you know that there is a chance that there is another Neo out there in the Matrix. Because in Reloaded, they talk about how there are like so many different Neos in the Matrix. Like there's the version that we're watching Neo right now is not the only version that's out there. There are like other versions where maybe Neo succeeds, maybe he fails, maybe he dies before he gets to even say anything about the humans versus machines. So I always have thought that you could have done Matrix after Revolutions. Instead of making a new Matrix film, you probably could have did some spin-offs where you're adding more breadth and more information about the world of Zion, its characters, and the maybe the beginnings of how the humans and machines first started, to be in conflict. I always thought that would have been interesting if they would have went that route. But I don't know. Maybe it would have cheapened what Matrix was. I don't know. But it's a nice idea.
No, yeah, because I think that's very true. Because that like you said, that moment at the end, where they're saying like, oh, we're gonna see him again, and it was very interesting to me because I felt like Revolutions did introduce these little tidbits of lore to the whole idea of basically every iteration of the Matrix having a one, having a Neo who came in. And there was elements of that I would have loved to have seen explored, like you said, in other, a TV show or another film, especially, when I believe it's when the Oracle is talking about, the source, and when they're saying about how like, Neo's ability to interact and destroy the machines outside of the Matrix was due to his connection with the source. And I was always so curious about that, and because I was like, oh, okay, so this indicates that Neo's creation, so to speak, is more than just his ability to interact with the Matrix. That the machines created him with this kind of, I don't know, this kind of augmented humanity, basically, maybe, because they don't go into that in Revolutions a little bit too much of how he waves his hand and they just blow up, basically. And so I was always very, very curious about that. And of course, just after he's given his all, after he's given his life, to save humanity, we see the machines taking his body off, and I remember when I first saw the film all those years ago, my imagination was going like, oh, where are they taking him? Okay, are we going to get like Matrix 4 now? What's going to happen? And yeah, I haven't seen Resurrections yet, but I've definitely heard it's a bit polarizing. I have heard.
Oh yeah, when you get to that, just pay attention to how they explain how Neo is able to even be back in another Matrix film. Just pay attention to how they bring him back, and it has a lot to do with Revolutions. And I don't know whether you'll like it or not, but for me, I thought it was very contrived and almost in the same way of how in Fast 9, Mister Nobody brings back Han in that film. It's kind of like the same way of what they do in Resurrections, but I'll leave you to be the judge of that.
It is funny because I've been because I've been looking on social media and just reading people's reviews on it and stuff, and it's definitely interesting because I've definitely heard a few people who have been like, oh, I loved it, it was amazing, it was great. Other people were like, it was all right. Other people were like, okay, this could have been better. And it's kind of funny because I did hear, and I don't know any of the context of it, but I know that one person mentioned that there's actually like a moment in Resurrections where they're actually like poking fun at Warner Brothers demanding another Matrix product. And so I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting. So, but yeah, there was one aspect that I did want to ask your opinion on, of what you thought. That it was one area of Revolutions that I didn't dislike what happened, but I didn't particularly care for the way it was done, and that was Trinity's death. That I kind of feel like I kind of knew that her death had to happen in this film, especially because Neo was obviously moving towards an ultimate sacrifice, and so it made sense that she also would die. I was a bit disappointed with how that happened in the film, because I was hoping for, I don't know, I don't want to say something a bit more bombastic or anything like that. But I guess with how much emphasis Reloaded had put on their relationship and kind of their epic love for each other, and how it almost, how it'd been seen of it transcending death, of how it's their love that brings Neo back in the first one. And then it's, Neo's, love for her that, fuels his decision when he's talking with the architect. And so seeing, as that we had seen all of that, elements to it, I was a bit disappointed with how they went with her death. It felt so, I don't know, I don't want to say pointless, but I don't know. I just felt like it could have possibly narratively been done a little bit better. But I wanted to ask your opinion on that.
I was actually shocked when I rewatched this film and I realized that Trinity did die. I actually had forgotten that she had passed away in this film. But when it comes to your point about how it is played out, I do kind of agree with you that it does play out just a little bit. It almost feels like the film kind of like throws away what should have been a bigger emotional anguishing moment. Like, this is Trinity. She's been with us since the beginning. She, outside of Neo, is an important character. She's a strong female character. She has her own agency, and there are times where she has come to the help of Neo and other characters. So she's very important. But when Revolutions, it's almost like she is a background character. It's almost like that she was very important and she meant something in the first two films, and then with this one, by the end, it's almost like, yeah, we got to go ahead and get rid of her. We got to use her as a way to spurn Neo to finish his journey, to achieve his destiny. And I did have a little bit of a problem with that. I do understand narrative wise why she would die. I mean, it's been since the beginning of time that often female characters are used for the service of male characters. And oftentimes, to get a male character to rise up or to achieve something insurmountable, something traumatic and painful has to happen to him. And so most of the time, female characters are written just to like, oh, well, this female got hurt. She got assaulted. She got beaten up, or she was killed and she died. And either the male character goes off the cliff and just goes crazy and doesn't care anymore, or the character finds that last bit of strength to achieve what he has set out to achieve. And that's what it felt like Trinity's death was in Revolutions. And that is one of the aspects of the film I was not a huge fan of.
No, I definitely agree that, for a trilogy, and especially a third film in said trilogy that was kind of aiming for that subverted expectations, for kind of saying like, okay, we're going to take something that you expect and we're going to turn, narrative tropes on their head, that we're going to say, okay, especially in Reloaded, hey, Neo's the one. Oh, hey, by the way, there was 6 others of him. It's like, and how they turn all those aspects on their head. To kind of see that not turned on its head, I would have really liked to have seen what you mentioned of how these, female characters that are used in service of pushing the male character forward. I would have loved to have seen some type of subversion of that in this third one, despite the fact that, okay, yeah, her death kind of was written on the wall in the sense that it kind of needed to happen. I don't know. I think that, there is possibly a better way for that maybe to have happened. I don't know, maybe even her staying behind in Zion, and dying, heroically in that sense. I'm not sure. So, we've chatted, about, the different elements of this film, the characters and, the human element and stuff. I would like to chat, as we kind of roll to the end here, I'd like to chat a little bit about the filmmaking aspects of it. And, just kind of like, what did you think about, because, the Matrix films have been known for, obviously, what we'd mentioned before, bullet time and, bringing this sort of like Hong Kong action film element to Western audiences, and in the fight choreography and such. And so how did you feel about how the third film, Revolutions, was made? Like, how did you feel about the filmmaking aspect of it in comparison to the other two?
So for the filmmaking aspect, there are a lot of mostly the cinematography, I would say, is very dark. It's grim. It really fits into the mood of us not knowing whether Zion is going to be saved. Will this be the end of the human race? What happens to Neo? What happens to all of these heroes that we're following? So that is one good thing that adds to the mood. The other thing is there's not really a lot of sequences that I would say are memorable. The one thing I can give credit to The Matrix Reloaded, it may not be the best film, but it does have that freeway chase
Oh
sequence.
man.
It does have the moment where the two trucks collide and then blow up. It has like some incredible moments in that film. But for Matrix Revolutions, I wouldn't say there aren't any incredible moments. If there is a notable moment, it's the Neo and Agent Smith fight. That for me is the best scene in this whole film. Like the way that it is shot, with the rain, with the big, it has a really big scope about it. You see all of these Agent Smith that are lined up on both sides watching this fight. They're like an audience. Then you have Neo and Agent Smith when they run towards each other and just collide, and it's like a big engulfing raindrop that just burst open. I love that. I love all of that. And it kind of saves the film for me, filmmaking wise, because it's not really anything exciting. It feels like the Wachowskis, maybe they were kind of getting tired. Maybe they were just ready to end it, but there's not nothing vibrant about the Revolutions from a filmmaking standpoint. The score is still great. I still love the score. The use of green in the frames really adds to the sense that we are stuck in this dystopian world. The costume design is okay. The robots that we see in Zion, I mean, they look nice, but they haven't aged all that well. Most of the special effects in this film haven't aged, but I don't really give a black mark for that because for the time, this was really pushing the cinematic medium forward. So if I could give this film a grade from a filmmaking sense, I would say it would be a C, I would say. I think the story is more impressive than what we get from a directorial standpoint.
No, I definitely would agree with you. That as you said, that Reloaded, for all of its flaws, that it does have, some of its action scenes were incredible. The freeway scene, the chateau, fight scene. There's elements that people pull out. They're like, hey, I remember that. And with Revolutions, there wasn't a lot of memorable moments, as you said, unfortunately. But that final fight is incredible. Like I absolutely loved it. And, as you said, the score, especially the score during the final fight, the chorus, it's amazing. It really adds that huge bombastic epic feel to it, that this is, a clash of the titans, so to speak. Um, and I really did enjoy the use of water in the final climactic moments. That huge, as you mentioned, that giant raindrop, that pops, was just really cool. And and because we always kind of see rain being used in the Matrix, and I just loved how they basically took that and added it tenfold, basically, and just made it just pouring rain, flooding everywhere. I thought that was really well done. And I do think that I don't know. I'd have to look. I don't know if Reloaded and Revolutions, if they were filmed back to back. I'm assuming maybe they were. Um, so I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to look that up. But I do feel like perhaps they were, as you said, maybe getting a bit tired, especially if these films were filmed back to back, because you have. I mean, possibly, what would this be? Almost, maybe 9 month shoot going on, possibly. So unfortunately it isn't all that memorable when it comes to the filmmaking aspect, but I did enjoy elements of the dock fight scene between the APUs and the machines. I did enjoy elements of that. It kind of really it kind of brought back some memories. I don't know if you remember these. You might be a bit too young, but the whole Mech Warrior video games from the 90s,
Yeah, I am too young for that. You're
yeah.
right.
I used to play a bit of that, when I was growing up, and so I have to admit, when those APUs came out, I was like, oh man, this is like Mech Warrior, so I did enjoy elements of that, but that was a bit of nostalgia for me, not so much excellence in filmmaking. As we kind of close up here, what would you say would be your final two things here? What would be your final ranking of the Matrix films? And feel free to include Resurrections as well, since you've seen it. Kind of include that in your 4 film ranking. And then what star rating would you give Revolutions?
So for me, this is what my conclusive ranking is after seeing Resurrections. It's number one, The Matrix, easy. One of the best action films ever made. A pure classic. Can't be topped. It'll be playing. It'll be playing for many people, millions of people everywhere, even when we're gone. So Matrix is number one. Um, Number two is very tricky, very tricky. I've been going back and forth on this between Reloaded and Revolutions. And I would say if I had to choose, I would give it to Revolutions. Revolutions would be my number two. Then for number three, I would go with Reloaded. Reloaded, like I say, from a blockbuster popcorn standpoint, it is amazing. Like, honestly, when I was 12 years old, I thought it was like one of the greatest films ever made just because of how action packed it was. But now seeing it, I can see that it's definitely a film that is very mainstream and definitely trying to go away. And it didn't put a bit emphasis on the story like the first Matrix did. It was definitely trying to go with a more entertaining standpoint, which nothing wrong with that, but something that is more obvious when you watch it now. And last place, unceremoniously and disappointingly, is Resurrections. It's honestly a film I wish never got made. Like I wish that instead of being resurrected, it should have been stay buried, like keeping it in the ground, 6 feet under, whatever. But it's a film that is stuck living in the past. It lives off of the legacy of the other three films, but doesn't do anything new with it. It doesn't push anything forward. And part of me wonders if was it because it was only Lana doing the writing for this and directing? Was it because the other Wachowski sister was not involved? Was it because Warner Brothers was looking to make a quick buck and they knew they could by just bringing back Keanu and bringing back Carrie-Anne Moss and bringing in a new Morpheus and bringing in all these new characters and just putting some gloss over it and just pretty much resting on their laurels? That's pretty much what Resurrection is in a nutshell. So Resurrection would easily be last place. My rating. My rating for Matrix, I used to have it at a 5-star, but it's a really, really great 4-star film. I would put it at 4 stars. Matrix Revolutions would be 3.5 for me. Matrix Reloaded would be 3-star, and Matrix Resurrections would be 2. And if it was and it caught me on a bad day, it would have been a 1-star, but it's a 2-star. So,
oh, that's funny, man. Okay, so I would say it was a bit difficult for me to come up with the with kind of the ranking and star rating myself. But let me pull up here. My Letterbox app closed here, so I have to just scroll back down to to my ratings here for him. So I would say when it comes to the I haven't seen Resurrections yet, so I'll just be ranking the original trilogy. But number one is 100% The Matrix, the first film. It's a spectacular action film. It gives us really interesting theological and philosophical ideas to ponder, and once the credits roll, you're still thinking about them. And it still functions really well as a standalone movie as well. Like you don't feel like you need to see the other ones. You want to see them, but it still tells its own encapsulated story very well. I did martial arts back in high school and early college, so I absolutely loved watching the choreography of those fight scenes. It was incredible. So I ended up I gave it one of my rare 5 stars, but I did give it a 5-star rating for that one. Then when it comes to number 2, it was tough for me, because I thought at first I had it, but then when I rewatched these, I was like, oh man, it's tough because Revolutions has its flaws, Reloaded has its flaws, but then they both have moments that really do bring me back. And even though I was feeling, not feeling Revolutions all that much, that just banging, third act fight between Neo and Smith, and Smith's, speech just really did bring me back. But at the end of the day, I think I have to go with, for my second one, would be The Matrix Reloaded for number 2. Because at the end, I adore the action scenes. I think just, the action scenes are spectacular. And also I just really enjoy the conversation at the end between Neo and the architect. I just think even though the film is problematic and a bit messy, as you mentioned before, I really just love that conversation at the end, and also the conversation with Neo and the Oracle too in the courtyard. And I think that those two moments just really do cement the film and just raise it very slightly above Revolutions for me. So, due to a bit of nostalgia, I ended up giving Reloaded 4 stars. In reality, I think it is lower than that, but my nostalgia had me give it a 4-star rating. And then, of course, kind of anticlimactically, my third one is Revolutions. And I want to say, with that, Revolutions and Reloaded, my 2 and 3 were so very close because it was very difficult, because I did really enjoy what Revolutions did do. Even if it didn't do all of it well, I still did enjoy the conclusion to the story. And so I gave Revolutions a 3.5 star to it. And I think that had those final moments with Smith and Neo not been done quite as well, I think probably it would have been a little bit lower than that 3.5 stars. But I think 3.5 stars is fair for that, and for how it concluded the trilogy. I'm very curious now to see Resurrections, and I am looking forward to seeing it. I hope I like it, but honestly, I'm not sure, because there's definitely some other critics and people, like yourself, whose opinion I trust, who haven't been too thrilled with it. So
Hey man, just go in there with a clear head and give it a shot. I mean, I've seen some people, outside of, where I'm at, that have given it glowing reviews and have said that it's one of their favorite blockbusters of the decade and that it really goes deep. But I mean, I don't know where I'm missing where they're seeing it goes deep. But I mean, there are a lot of people who are out here who are loving this film, and so I can't discredit them. But you know, if we were speaking in all honesty, I mean, when you watch it, you'll understand what I mean. They should have never even thought about doing a Resurrections. They should just let this whole series alone. If you're going to do something in the Matrix, do a spinoff, or do something else other than just what Resurrections achieves. So
yeah, because it's interesting, because there's been a little bit of conflicting information going on, but I know, like, the other day, I want to say the 27th, Deadline published an article where they claimed that a 5th Matrix film was in the works. And then of course some of the producers of Resurrections have said that they didn't have plans for a sequel, but of course the plans of a film's producers are different from a studio executive's plans.
mm-hmm.
And so it's like, I love the world of the Matrix, so automatically I feel like, okay, yeah, I would be interested in a 5th film. That being said, I do think, and I would stand by this, even if I come out of, Resurrection saying like, hey, I loved this film, I think it was fantastic. I do hope that if they do a 5th film, I do hope that maybe they hand it over to some fresh blood. And that's not any sort of a knock, on Lana or Lily at all. Because, they delivered one of the greatest blockbusters of all time in The Matrix. But I think sometimes, once you've kind of hit, your 3rd and 4th film in a franchise, if you're going to continue it, I would love to see, maybe like, an exciting new voice, in direction, maybe come on board, to write and create this new story. And whether that includes, Keanu Reeves, and Carrie-Anne Moss, or if it's new characters or whatever, I do kind of hope that maybe we get some new talent and new vision in there.
Oh yes, this series definitely needs new lifeblood. It does. I don't know what form that takes in, but I mean, anything would be welcoming. Anything different, new ideas, like adding some dexterity to this story. I mean, because there is so much about the Matrix that you could flesh out. There are so many areas where you could take it. I mean, because the Matrix is based on almost like VR, like augmented reality in a sense. There's so many things you can do, especially now with the way that technology has gained and has risen to like more like realistic heights since the 90s. I mean, yes, there is a place where there can be good Matrix films, and there can be a plethora of Matrix stories that, whether that's in theaters or on a streaming service, there's a place for it. It's just you just have to get people in there that really care about it and that are going to do right by it, and not looking at it as a cash cow.
No, yeah, I 100% agree, because I think that the world is large enough, and to explore whether it's in the future, of the Matrix, or going back to the past, as you mentioned, with maybe some of the earlier days of the war. I know that Warner Brothers at one point was talking about like a young Morpheus film, about like, kind of when the roundabouts when the war started. And I don't know, that might be interesting. I'm not sure. But yeah, I think, hopefully some fresh blood in there. And I don't know, finding, as much as I love Keanu Reeves and I'm always on board for anything that he wants to do. And so part of me wants to be like, oh, of course he needs to come back for another Matrix film. But at the same time, finding maybe a fresh new talent out there, to come and lead a new film might be kind of exciting. I don't know.
Yeah, gotta find the right people. Yeah, and not worry about getting somebody off of name recognition. Just get the best person for the job.
Mm-hmm. 100%, and I think a lot of blockbusters and a lot of movies sometimes falter, I think, with trying to find, somebody with name recognition, because, even though they say, and a lot of people say like, hey, the movie star is dead, that people aren't going to see, movie stars. I don't. I disagree with that statement. Like, where movie stars aren't necessarily opening films as much anymore, people definitely go and see a movie because they want to see, who the headliner is. And we'll see if the Jack Reacher TV show is as popular as the first Tom Cruise movie was, because people went to see, Tom Cruise, kick ass. And so,
Mm-hmm.
so I think that definitely, is true. But at the same time, I love to see that fresh talent come in. I remember, I'll never forget, when Michael B. Jordan first, exploded onto the scene, this fantastic actor no one had ever heard of, Fruitvale Station and stuff. So I don't know. I always love to see that happen. So I'm kind of the sense, that I feel like the Matrix's future is probably on HBO Max. Because, Resurrections isn't doing, I don't know, it's not doing too well at the box office, but it hasn't released in
Mm-hmm.
China yet, so we'll see. We'll see how well that does. But when you look at the HBO Max numbers so far, it's been doing pretty well. It opened to almost 3 million, over the weekend, and I'm sure in the next 30 days, it'll probably do very well. So I don't know. I think the future might be on there, and so in that case, I just say, find a cool, young actor who no one's ever heard of, who's done a great job, and a cool new director, and let's see what happens.
Yeah, and people have to understand that if your stories are just now finding a home and they're being released on a streaming service, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think streaming services now, they allow a lot more people to have more eyes towards something. I mean, imagine that you have another Matrix film released in theaters. Now, what if this pandemic gets worse? Well, then you're not going to have anybody in theaters who is going to see that. But if you release this on HBO Max, then of course you're going to get a lot more eyes to it. You're going to get a lot more people who wouldn't necessarily go and see it and spend money for it. They'll gladly stay at home and watch this. So yes, I would love to see if more Matrix related projects are released, whether that's a TV show form, or whether that's a streaming movie. Hey, I'm all for it. And that doesn't mean that the quality is going to get lessened necessarily. It's just all about finding a new home and just getting more comfortable with how new times are. I don't think I don't even think the Resurrections really needed necessarily to be released in a theater. I mean, it's not really. I saw it on my OLED at home, but it's not really something that I think would be enhanced by going to watch it in theaters. Honestly, so
I'm much the same way. I'm gonna be watching it here at home, on HBO Max, and because it's like you said, it's kind of a different world now, with the whole pandemic stuff, and just of if and when people are coming back to theaters, and and we've definitely seen a pushback, with No Way Home, and I was very happy to see how well that film did. Because it was nice to see theaters get a little bit of extra coin after everything they've been through the last year and a half. But we'll see if if the world of theaters continues, though, because we're not going to always have a No Way Home scenario,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, I was sad seeing a lot of the smaller films like Nightmare Alley, just being completely shut out, and stuff. And so, I haven't seen Nightmare Alley yet, but I've been hearing amazing things. And so I was like, I really wanted to see, a period film set in the 1930s and 40s. I was like, man, I want this film to do well. It's like, so I don't know, we'll see how everything turns out. But like you said, just because something has to go to streaming doesn't necessarily mean the quality has to be lower. It can be, we've seen Roma, on Netflix and such. So,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, well, I appreciate you coming on. I think this was a very interesting conversation, looking at this film, and I appreciated all of your thoughts on it. And it was fun talking with somebody who did enjoy it, because unfortunately I don't find a huge amount of people who like revolutions. And so it was nice chatting with somebody who appreciated what it was trying to do, even if it didn't quite do all of it as well as we hoped.
Yeah, I agree, man. I enjoyed having this conversation. The Matrix, like I said, is always a film that's going to spark a conversation no matter what, good or bad. So, I mean, hey, what better film series can you not talk about other than The Matrix? Maybe Lord of the Rings. I mean, Twilight, if that's your thing, maybe. But I mean,
no, that's very true, and I'm waiting. I'm expecting an announcement at some point for Twilight Resurrections. It's like oh
yeah, I mean, I remember. I think Twilight was a thing of its era because that was like the craze for fiction and books. You had Twilight, you had 50 Shades of Grey, you had all these books coming out at that moment. And I remember when the Twilight films came out in theaters. I mean, every time they would, it was always a lot of people going to the theaters watching it. It was what everybody was talking about. Now, by the end, you could definitely tell that there was some fatigue with Twilight, and people were ready for it to be done. And I'm not gonna lie, they're not good movies. I mean, I'm just gonna be honest with you, they're not good movies. They are definitely a guilty pleasure, and they're really set for one audience. Teenage girls, Team Edward, Team Jacob, so
it's so true. When it comes to those guilty pleasures, that's how I felt when I was watching a Red Notice on Netflix. I was like, this is not a good movie at all. But you know what? I would be lying if I wasn't saying that I wasn't laughing and that I didn't have a good time. I was like, I really enjoyed myself watching that movie, even though if it was complete and utter schlock. It's like oh. So it is funny to see that, but I agree with you. It's like I think with the Matrix, it's going to be one of those quadrilogies now that will be discussed for decades. And I'm sure if podcasts are still around in the next 40 years, I'm sure there's going to be two other guys talking about it. Again, 40 years from now. And I think that that's the sign of a good franchise, even if it does have its flaws and even if it does falter at certain points later on, if you're still talking about it after a long time, like we are, I think that shows that there is some good stuff there. So where can our listeners, follow your work or see what you're up to?
Well, if you want to follow me in anything that I'm watching or possibly reviewing, you can follow me on letterboxd.com under the alias Black Nerd Magic. You can follow me on Facebook under my real name, Caless Davis, and that's spelled Caless. I'm always posting here and there about films I'm watching, series I'm possibly taking on, or TV shows that I'm currently trying to binge through. And also check me out in the Feelin Film discussion Facebook group. We have an awesome group where we welcome anybody. We welcome hot takes. Our friend Byron right here has a lot of hot takes that we try to dissect and understand in the group. But hey, if you love film, you got a passion, and you want to discuss anything, come to the Feelin Film discussion Facebook group. definitely a good time. So
No, and I can definitely echo that. That group is a lot of fun. You know, it has a lot of great people in it, and it's very welcoming, and it's a great time. You know, discussing film. You know, and it is true. You know, about my hot takes. You know, because I'm going to be delivering another one soon with my best films of 2021. So it's going to cause some discussion. So, oh man. Well, like I said, I appreciate again, you know, you coming on, and I'm looking forward to our audience hearing our conversation.
hey man, I am as well.
All right, man. Well, thanks again for coming on.
Hey, thank you for having me, man. This is great.